And so now we're going to wrap up here this afternoon, with Stacy Bohlen. Stacy Bohlen is a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of the Chippewa Indians of the United States. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the National Indian Health Board, a position held for 19 years. She is the longest continually serving Executive Director, managing multiple federal health equity advocacy campaigns, serving all 574 tribes in the USA. Her Indian name is McKinnock Kwe, and it's her Indian name is McKinnock Kwe, Turtle Woman. With that naming comes the responsibility to speak the truth for the people. We build warriors for the health of all American Indians and Alaskan Natives at the NAIHB. It's a privileged position, it's an honor, and she loves her team and her work. Ms. Bohlen has successfully advocated for the collaboratively facilitated the permanent reauthorization of the Indian Health Care Improvement Act, led systems change to strengthen tribal health, Medicare, Medicaid policy, made unprecedented inroads in international Indigenous health, and increased federal health care funding, budget and appropriations for Native American and Alaskan Natives by $19 billion. That's billion with a B, folks. So, Ms. Bohlen, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
Miigwech, ani buju, Mikkinik Kwe Indigenous. Good afternoon. I have some of my friends, fellow journey persons on this fight for our health all around the world to join me. Thank you for being up here with me. I don't think it's working enough very loud. I love your necklace. You're lucky that now I can just start that part over. I don't have to go like a half hour in and then come back. Oh, I think I have a clicker. Okay, so just, when you get up in places like this that are incredibly just austere and a privilege to be here and everything, you get excited, you forget what you're going to talk about. So I wore this shirt, so in case I get off track, you still get the message. This is what this is about. This is about the fact that our strength is in our culture. Our culture heals. It heals what came before. It heals where we stand. It heals where we're headed. Our culture knows. We already know the answers. Nobody has to tell us. We're reclaiming them every second of our lives, every beat of our heart. And culture leads. And it's going to lead us into a place where suicide is a word that isn't even in our languages anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do this? Oh, this? That? You're in good hands. It's all right. It's going to be okay. So again, my traditional name is Mikkinik Kwe, given to me in ceremony. The name has the responsibility to speak the truth for all the people. I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm the one that in case you're wondering who's speaking the truth, it would be me. It's a name my medicine man told me you have to grow into, and you have tremendous responsibilities with the name. You need a spiritual guide to help you as you grow, and that you'll be able to see the future. You'll be able to see where we're going and have a very strong view of what's going to happen. My spiritual mother was a woman named Kathy Abramson. She passed in April. She was Northern Lights woman, and she was a councilwoman for the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, where I'm a citizen. She was also on our tribal council. She was a chairman of the board for the National Indian Health Board. She fought cancer 3 times and had a double organ transplant, and that is one tough Anishinaabe. She fought it. She used traditional healing along with what Western medicine had to offer. And she lasted 15 years longer than they said she would. Because culture heals. Culture heals. So, who's the National Indian Health Board? What the heck is that? That's not a vanity organization that's like, oh, we're going to help the Indians. It's not one of those. National Indian Health Board was founded in 1972 by the tribes themselves. This organization is accountable to the tribes. Everything we do is driven by the tribes. The tribes were winning the race to the bottom for everything, every health statistic, every way that one could, to the point where we really thought it would be the end of us. And the tribe stepped forward and said, no more. We're going to create an organization that is our unified voice in Washington, D.C., because the number one disease we suffer from may be invisibility, but with the National Indian Health Board, we're going to create space for our voice. We're going to put light on us, and we're going to be in the shadow of the dominant culture seat of power to do it. And they moved to Washington, D.C. in 2001 from Denver, and that is exactly what we've been doing ever since. It's our job to advocate as the united voice for all federally recognized tribes, American and Indian and Alaska Native, in the space of health and public health. And that's what we do. When we're talking about this issue, I'm going to go back and forth between the serious and try to have some light moments because the topic is so heavy. But when you talk about suicide in Indigenous communities, the first two indicators you have to throw out are depression and poverty, because they are as common as the sand. These were the words of a non-native researcher in Canada named Michael Chandler. Much of what I'm going to talk about today found its roots in his work. His work, I'll never forget hearing him speak in Vancouver about 2006. He said these words, and then he said, if you want to know why suicide rates are so high in First Nations communities, you don't go to the communities where it's high. You go to the communities where it's rare. And you look at why is that rare? Why? What is the commonality of that rareness that makes these communities healthier, stronger, whatever the words are? And you know what the indicator was? Culture. Where the presence of tradition, healing, knowledge, song, dance, prayer, medicines, where those things were strong, there was almost no suicide. And where there is a community that had been ravaged by assimilation, where culture was hard to find, hard to hold on to, hard to rekindle, suicide rates were off the charts. So that's the basis of what we're going to talk about today. But first, let me tell you about my husband. I just got married in September. I had a catch and release program that I was running for several years. And one of my friends said, you just got rid of that last one. You ought to, go out there and see what's out there. And I'm like, the last one nearly damn killed me. I don't need another one. She's like, oh, you don't know. I'm like, oh, I know. I have a catch and release program. I know. So she made me get on Match.com. She was relentless in her pressure. And I told the truth, which is a good way to never meet anybody. I told how much I really weigh. That man loves me. Anyway, what ended up happening is we were talking back and forth on Match, on the emails. I didn't know he was from Michigan. I'm from Michigan. I didn't know that his life's work was to create methods to restore fresh water that had been polluted with heavy metals. Anishinaabe, we are keepers of the water. Michigan's surrounded by 25% of the world's fresh water. That's what we are supposed to be taking care of. That is part of my sacred responsibility. And I didn't know he was a Lutheran, which I am weirdly on that too. I don't know, that's just the German side. My dad did that. I got it now, I'm all Lutheraned up. So when you sign up for one of these programs, they send you, it doesn't matter what you tell them you want. They send you 100 pictures every day, maybe 5, but it felt like 100. And all the pictures look like they were taken last night as mugshots, okay? And you're like, oh, I can't wait to meet somebody. Do I need to go downtown to the police department to meet him? And when you see one that's like really good looking and like, oh, I'm a widower, I have 2 tiny children and they need a mother, and you're like, oh, that's perfect because I don't have children and I could be great at this. You find out they're really an algorithm that's looking for women my age who maybe have a job. And so when I saw him, I'm like, fake. So I thought, I'm gonna write one word. I'm writing one word. And if he's fake, he's gonna write me back, I'm the most beautiful woman in the world. Don't matter that it's true. Stranger's not gonna say that to you. Anyway, so I write back, interested? I write to him, interested, question mark. He writes back, interested, exclamation point. I'm like, well, dang, he can't be a robot, because it would have been a lot more complicated, right? So time goes on. And we never called each other on the phone, we're just emailing. And then one day he says, oh, I have to go to Detroit for 2 weeks to take care of my ailing father, I'll be offline. And I'm like, married. So I forgot about him. And I was like, forget it. So what I did while he was away, because I'd already forgotten about him, he didn't exist. He was now part of my catch and release program. I went in the backyard every day at sunrise, and I laid down tobacco 7 days in a row. How many of you seen that movie, Practical Magic? Seen that movie? You know, where she says, I want a man with one blue eye, one green eye, and all that stuff. Well, I kind of, creator, I did it with respect. I kind of did something like that. Every day I went out there, and I'm like, well, I asked for a different quality that I wanted in a man. The first day I said, the man I had been with prior to this was an atheist, and he used to belittle me for my beliefs. And I said, the first thing is he's got to know you, he's got to love you, and believe in you, and you have to be the road he travels, or don't let me even know that he exists. Okay, I got that one down. Then the next day I said, he has to love his mother. I said, treat his mother great. I think she's the greatest. And then it went on, and on the last day, I couldn't think of anything, so I said, oh yeah, I said, he has to be incapable of telling a lie. Be very careful when you pray that, because don't ever say, does this outfit make me look fat? Because he'll be like, no, it's your body. You can't be mad because you prayed for it. And he's never been married, he has no children, so he's without guile. He's just an honest man. I mean, he is everything I prayed for. So the last day I said, it would be okay if he wasn't too hard on the eyes. And then he sends me an email when he gets back into town, and he says, I'm back and I want to meet you tomorrow. I'm like, oh, must not have gone well with his wife. And I thought, you know, after that jerk I was with, I got to turn a corner, or I'm going to be stuck in this narrative. So I'm just going to meet this joker, and then I can say that I've turned the corner. Well, now I'm married to him. He's the only one I met. But he's 62 years old. So after the wedding, I said, shame we can't grow old together. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, you're already there. And then I walked into this room today. This is from today, reserved for elders. Next Sunday, I'm going to be 60. I'm going to be an elder. So we grew old together. So you see what I mean about how people lose track of what they're talking about? So for us and our people, I like to think of what happened to us as the big hand of 1492. I think of the Creator as having a quiver on his back full of arrows of destiny, the arrows of the Maori people, the arrows of the Aborigines, the arrows of First Nation, and the arrows of our people, the arrows of those in South America who made first contact. He pulls the arrow out of his quiver. He pulls the bow back and he shoots it into the sky. And that's who we were meant to be. But in the arc of our destiny came the big hand of 1492 that swatted our arrow from the sky. And since that time, we have been trying and succeeding in many, many ways to not only hold on to who we are, but to survive it, to thrive in it, to reclaim who we are, and to live beautifully. The Holy Roman Catholic Church declared that Spain owned the New World and every indigenous inhabitant in it. We were owned. If we weren't Christians, we were deer. We were not capable of possessing land because we didn't have a soul. Anybody ever met a really big landowner? I don't think they have souls. I can think of somebody right now who I think you know who I mean. I don't know, I'm just saying. So it didn't take them any time. 1493, less than a year later, they were in front of the Pope saying, we found this great place. There are all these people running around there that they're just wild. They don't talk like us. They don't act like us. Oh, okay, well then just take what you want because they're not us. And then there were wars for our land. I don't know how to animate this because this shows how the land shrunk over time. That's what the United States, Alaska's obviously not on here. Sorry, I can't animate it for you. I'm not that talented. It works on my laptop. If you want to see it later, I'll show it to you. But there were wars for our land, wars that did not end. Oh, look what I did. That's what it looks like. And when you see that it also went back and forth. They took it, they gave it. They took it, they gave it. They took it, they gave it. And then they just took it. So I call this state-sponsored terrorism, really. See how it grows back and forth? So in the Declaration of Independence, we were called merciless Indian savages. And the Indian Removal Act then came along in 1830 to 1850. That's when they just started taking us from where Creator put us and moving us west of the Mississippi River. Our homelands were left behind to be occupied by other people, those had invaded. And then Andrew Jackson, of course, signed that law in 1830, and thus began many trails of tears. But it was Martin Van Buren who carried it out largely. State-sponsored terrorism, too. This is when we had the Code of Indian Offenses that outlawed our religious practices. This is very, very critical to what we're discussing today. The subject is suicide prevention. I believe that the despair really took hold then. When you think about our ancestors standing in that river of time, watching our relatives be killed, watching us being dragged from land, things like the Sand Creek Massacre occurring, they still had the wherewithal to write treaties that included what they envisioned we would need to live in this new place, this newly occupied territory. They always had health care, education, housing, food. They knew. They looked into the future and they knew. Cherokee Nation versus Georgia was the beginning of the Trail of Tears. That was when the Cherokee Nation challenged the state of Georgia for imposing their will on the people of the Cherokee Nation, trying to take their land, terrorizing their women, terrorizing the men, killing people randomly. Well, guess what? They won that case. And guess what Andrew Jackson said? Andrew Jackson said, if the Supreme Court wants to keep those Indians on the land, they can send their cavalry to stop me. And that began the Trail of Tears. And then the trifecta, boarding schools. Boarding schools, all of what you're seeing are ways to erase us if they couldn't outright kill us, right? So you take away everything that makes us us, and then maybe they can tolerate us, right? But what happens is when you go to a boarding school, the first thing they teach you is that you speak your language, you're going to be beaten. Like my mother had bleach put in her mouth when she spoke Anishinaabe. My boss, who is a EAC person, a nation from Alaska, he's a Vietnam veteran. His mother was the last full speaker of the EAC language. She had a big scar on her forehead from where someone chucked a cup at her head because she was speaking EAC. She didn't stop. That language is still alive today. But what is it that is so powerful about language that they had to wipe it out? I want to challenge you about this for a second. We're going to get to the part of this presentation when we talk about the United Nations and the work with the World Health Organization, where I met my good friend here, Emma, and where Ricky and I started out years ago knowing we had to make something international for Indigenous people. Thank you for being up here with me. Thank you. I wanted to acknowledge that and honor that contribution that you made that I don't think people even know. But when you think about our language, Language is identity, language is power, right? So I'm sitting at the United Nations, much like this conference, and I'm looking around, and they all have the ear things, right? When you go to the UN or the World Health Organization so that we can understand the languages. I couldn't get the video to play here. So I took a little video of the dial, because you can dial in which language you want. Every one of them is a colonizer's language. Here we are at the United Nations Permanent Forum on the Rights of Indigenous People, and all the languages we have to listen to have commonality are the conqueror's languages. And there's nobody sitting up in that booth that goes Anishinaabe English, or goes Navajo Spanish, or Haudenosaunee Italian. That's not gonna happen. It's English to Spanish, Spanish to Portuguese, etc. So I took a little video of that dial right as our witness was talking about why language matters in Geneva, Switzerland 2 weeks ago. And I started to think when I was in Australia, when you and I first met, Ricky, when we were at the Healing Our Spirit Worldwide conference, sitting in this auditorium, I'd never been anywhere. I mean, my town's this big. I mean, you could run across it and be like, I ran across a whole nation today. Done. They were that good at squishing us out. So I'm in this auditorium, and I remember seeing all the UN things on TV. I'd never been to anything like that before. And I'm sitting there, and all these people, Canada, all of our Aborigine people were talking. I didn't need one of these things, one of those ear things, because everybody spoke English. And I started to think to myself, you mean we're united by the conqueror's language? That has to be a big mistake, because we're united by the conqueror's language. Look at all the nations represented in this room, but we can talk to each other. We have to stand on that as a strength that we can own. It's forced upon us, but we can make something of it that serves us as well. So I'd like to talk about Foucault's pendulum and the elegance of colonization. How many of you are familiar with the 18th century physicist Foucault, who thought that there was a geomagnetic force on the earth, and that if you could build something that would harness it, it would just run forever. You don't even have to push it around. Well, that's what he thought. And you know what I think? I think that's the elegance of colonization. I think it is such an elegant construct that we are so dyed in it that we don't even know that we're dyed in it. I'll give you an example. How many of you ever been to the Smithsonian Museum, National Museum of the American Indian? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you had lunch there? How many of you had to take out a mortgage to have lunch there? So expensive, right? The food's great, but dang. So I go up to the counter and I pull out my tribal ID card and I said, hey, do I get a discount because I'm an Indian? And the woman who was wearing hijab put her head back and laughed and looked at me and she goes, you're Indian? You don't look Indian. And I put my hand on her forearm as gently as I could, because I think you kind of figured out it's really not how I roll. And I said, sister, I am Indian, so this is what Indian looks like. That's what we fight. I have had people from other tribes say to me, you're not really Indian. What blood quantum are you? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you ask my German Shepherd first? Let's find out if he's part Beagle. Take away the fact that he looks like a German Shepherd. Does that make him more? And I'm being facetious. I don't say this to our people, but I think it and I feel it. Because that's the elegance of colonization. That's the elegance. It runs without anybody's hand having to push it. Nobody taught that woman at the museum to say those horrible words. It's part of the fabric of America. She just sucked it up somewhere along the line, sitting in our own museum. And as outrageous as that is, that's more the norm. And this is what we fight against, even for fighting suicide. Identity. I mean, I'm not going to use a B word, okay? But I am one of those strong ones with the B word. I'm strong. I wasn't always. But if you say those things to somebody who is fragile, say those things to somebody who's desperately trying to overcome colonization and hold on to their culture and reclaim it, figure out what it means, they could be really, really crushed and lost forever. And if somebody looks at them and says, oh, you're part Indian, what part? And they are so shamed that they say, I'm not really Indian. We've killed one more. That's how powerful words are. That's how powerful language is, culture, and that is how elegant colonization is. So I did something bad, and I don't know what it is. It says that I have to update. I think I talked too long. It says I have to update this with a 4K video downloader that's available. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking, but we're not going to have any more slides. Okay, I'm sure you have figured out that that's going to be okay. All right, so what I want to talk about then, and let's just get right to it. What if every single thing that has been done to us to colonize us, to assimilate us, to kill us off, to make us ashamed of who we are, to the point where we will deny who we are, to the point where we might even commit a violent act against ourselves because we don't know where we stand. What is the river I'm in? What is the ground I'm standing on? What if all of the things they did to make that how we feel about ourselves, what if we could undo it? What if we could have a way of thinking, a way of being that reclaims, restores, renews our truth about what culture is to us, unapologetically, unashamedly? This is the work that we're doing. This is how I met Emma. This is the dream that we had with Ricky. You know the stats. I'm not going to go there. Look at that. That's someone who practiced their slides, right? I knew it was right there. What if that holds the keys to our healing? Cultural continuity, what we started with. It is the ability to preserve historical traditions of a culture, carry them forward with that culture into the future. It is closely linked to the concept of our identity, and it has a major influence on our confidence and self-esteem. This is what we know. The legacy of genocide, the enduring systemic racism, assimilation, all the things we just discussed that were required to create America, they have negatively impacted our health. And guess what? Guess what Ricky and I figured out? What year was that, Ricky? Was that 2010, 11? It was before COVID, 17, it was before COVID. We started talking. I had the privilege of meeting Ricky and his delegation when they came to the United States to learn more about self-governance, right? About our model of self-governance. And I started thinking, listening to you talk, all the health disparities he talked about for his people, they were ours. They're freaking identical. How can that be? A totally, completely different political construct. Their language is one of the official languages of that country. They got it going on. How the heck can they have all that and their stats are just like ours? And then I started to think, what about Canada? Same. What about Australia? Same. Indonesia? Same. Brazil? Same. Guess what we have in common? Colonization. We got to decolonize. We have to decolonize. We will beat suicide with a stick when we decolonize and reclaim who we are. Suicide prevention programs for our people must reflect our authorship. We author what they say. We don't go to HRSA, SAMHSA, wherever your agencies are called. I'm sorry, I don't know what they are, but I'm guessing it's the same kind of deal, and have them go, look what we made, we're bestowing this on you. No, thank you. How many of you know the Special Diabetes Program for Indians? National Indian Health Board has gotten that thing renewed 11 times. Why does it work? Why does it work? That program, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, call that program the second most successful public health program in the United States of America behind childhood vaccinations. Not the second most native success, the second, period. Why? because it is informed and directed by our culture, our knowledge, how we want to be healthy, how we say we're healthy, what we choose to eat. Our exercises may not be on a track running around. It may be in a canoe, right? Or on a lacrosse field, eh? Just saying. So, in case I got off track, culture heals, culture knows, culture leads, and the indigenous determinants of health are our future because that's our past. It's the same river. It's the same river, and no one can sell it to you. You already own it. The indigenous determinants of health are what we are doing on a global basis to reclaim our standing, to refurbish the ground we stand on, the strong ground of our culture and our knowledge. All the ancestors who have walked this path before and made it flat and nice for us so that now we can do that for our people who come after us. Here you can, if you go use these QR codes, you can get the articles that we wrote, the papers that we wrote. Emma is part of that leadership group that created the Indigenous Determinants of Health. In 2023, we had the initial Indigenous Determinants of Health that we presented to the United Nations Permanent Forum. I got to be the one to do it. Can you even believe that? I can't even believe it. My mom, all those years I was lobbying and being on Capitol Hill, my mom would be like, "I'm proud of you, but when are you going to do something for our people?" Isn't it enough that I'm successful? She must have just been like, "I'm not putting my hand softly on your arm, I'm gonna slap you." When are you gonna do something for our people? And then I got to do that. They let me, just that one time though, they didn't let me do it again. I don't know why. Anyway, so you can get the articles here. I strongly encourage you to read them. It's like reading a story about yourself. It's a 33 determinants of our health. Social determinants of health. Joe Biden is president. We know that Joe Biden has kept his word about Indian health. He said he was going to put in his budget full funding for the Indian Health Service. He did. Does that mean that it passed? No, but we're working on it. We're working on it. He's the first president to ever do that. He fought for contract support costs in our self-governance model to be mandatory. Supreme Court backed it up. We just won June 6th, mandatory. We won. Thanks for supporting that, Seneca Nation. We wrote an amicus brief, and we laid down the whole history of Indian health, of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, and why this is the right way to go. I'm happy to share it with you. If you ever need to advocate, lobby, talk about who we are, where we came from, how it all happened, it's all there. Very proud of that. Very proud of that document. I didn't write one word of it, but I'm standing up here talking like I did, huh? Yeah, you bet. Okay, and the second one, that was the one that we put forward this year. These were presented at the United Nations. This is some of our folks. You see Jeff Roth in there. This was the 2023 group. I hadn't met Emma yet. This is our group from the National Indian Health Board. And that's me in the front there getting the chance to do that presentation. And thanks to the work of like everybody ever, it passed unanimously as part of the work of the Permanent Forum. And then we took it, yeah, right? Right? So then we went to the World Health Organization. Now, when we started this talk together, I talked about how the National Indian Health Board is in Washington, D.C. We're in the shadow of the dominant culture, seat of power, right? Why? Because if we're not, we're invisible. And invisibility equals death in this country. You put a reservation out in the middle of nowhere that mainstream America will never see. They are not meant to be seen. And if you can't see it in the U.S., there's no problem, right? No problem. So we're getting ready to go to Geneva last year. And Jeff and I went through ceremony, by the way. I had two brothers, both passed on. Actually 20 years ago, we went through ceremony to become siblings. So I beat him up as much as I can and say mean things to him and steal his clothes. Okay, that's supposed to be hilarious. I'm actually really nice to him. Anyway, so we go. Before we went, I called my boss, aforementioned Vietnam veteran. Not a man who shrinks from a challenge, easily rattled, gets shook, like never. Phenomenal human being, Bill Smith. And I say, Chairman, we can't get in. I don't think we should go. He's like, What do you mean? I said, we tried to get standing. The U.S. won't return our phone calls. The State Department won't return our phone calls. Global Health at HHS won't call us back. Why are we going? We're not going to get in. And he says, what did you say? Why does the National Indian Health Board exist? So we're not going to be invisible. What? So we're not invisible. He said, if you don't go, there aren't going to be any Indians there at all, so you're going. Pack your bags. So I packed my bags, Jeff and I went. This picture that you see over there with the yellow writing, that is literally us at a cafe on the sidewalk listening to the UN proceedings on his phone because we could not get into the room. 77 representatives from the United States of America, not one Indigenous person, and the 2 Indians are sitting out on the street, but we're there, and guess what happened? Guess what happened? Brazil found out we're there. The, what is that? PAHO is the Pan-American Health Organization. All of the countries south of the American border, they were there. See this picture of the guy with this extremely phenomenal feathers? He is the Minister of Health for the country of Brazil. 2023, the country of Brazil put forward a resolution saying Indigenous health needs to be a priority on the world stage. 76 years of the World Health Organization that had never happened because we showed up. They asked us to be part of their event. I was asked to moderate. Jeff presented. The American delegation had planned to abstain. That's a giant oak tree that can put a whole bunch of countries under its shade who can also have permission to abstain because the big old US abstained. But because we showed up as Americans and spoke in favor of this and raised awareness about it and did media about it, the US representatives in the room went back and it passed unanimously. I can thank Brazil for that. So time goes on and we are pushing. And this is the work that Em and I are, I'm going to start calling you M&M. Emma and I, just us, just 2 of us, no. It's like she said. You know, it's funny because Ricky and I, we were the brilliant geniuses who thought of it first. No, everybody thought of it. But we weren't talking to each other, right? When this group formed, we started to realize Indigenous peoples from countries around the world were coming to this realization, this awakening together. You know that's the wind of the Spirit. That is Creator moving through us at a time when we can receive the message and have the vision and the wisdom to obey and do it and show up. It was happening all over the world. That's how this group got formed. So we went. And, you know, what I was saying about Biden, this is what happened 2 weeks ago. Oh, no, you're in there. This was April, sorry. What happened was President Biden kept his word. Almost everything he said that he would do for us, he did. Let's just give him a hand, because who does that? We've not experienced that. I mean, I pray that what he has in retirement will be a wonderful experience for him where he can sit back and say, I did something that mattered to millions and millions of people, right? That's not what this speech is, so I'm going to move on. This is this speech. So Biden says we're going to have health equity in this country. Let me ask you a question. Raise your hand if when the social determinants of health were being written, someone asked you as a Native person, what does that look like as a Native person? I can't raise my hand because nobody asked me. Did anybody ask any of you? All right, times 4.5 million. But we have the social determinants of health that are the gold standard for what we say. Well, if you meet these, you're healthy. Wow, what's mind, body, spirit? I don't see that in there. What's traditional healing? I don't see that. I don't see trauma, recovery from genocide. Does that really talk to me? Is that about me? So if you can achieve health equity by those standards, have they achieved it for us? How? How is it even possible, right? So what we're pushing for on the global stage and domestically is changing what that means to what we say it means. We, the big W, the big we, all of us around the world. We say what it means. That's what's in those articles that you see the QR codes for. Guess what happened in Geneva 2 weeks ago? The World Health Organization is updating their definition of social determinants of health. It's a 7-page document. One of those pages is about indigeneity. We're winning.